Good Tuesday morning, Pastor Rob here. We just began our series Sunday on the resurrection of Christ, which is the single most important event in all of human history. If Christ is alive, we have hope, we have a future. The grave is defeated, Satan is defeated, and there is eternal life. If he is not alive, then we have no hope, and our preaching and our faith is in vain. But we know he is alive, and I'm going to present over the next 7 to 8 weeks the argument, so we have the evidence that we need to defend our faith that Jesus Christ is alive and well today, and more important to the believer, he's coming back. Certainly if we pass away in this life, we'll be with him in paradise, as he said to the thief on the cross. But I was just thinking, we began in Eden, the Garden of Eden, and I want to say that that kind of relates to the hedge. We've talked about having a hedge around us, where God puts a hedge around us, Job chapter 1. And I want to encourage everybody to stay within that hedge. Because as we looked at the cross, the death, the crucifixion, the resurrection, the thing that put Christ on the cross was our sin. He had to go to the cross. God crucified him to satisfy the breach of his holiness, to satisfy his demand for our violation of his law, of his commands. And we put Jesus on the cross, and it all began in Eden. So we began in Eden this week, from Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to look at 3 a little bit more, and about Lucifer and how he was in the garden tempting Eve. I just want to encourage everybody to stay within the hedge. And I say that because so many times we want to see how far we can push God. How much can I get away with? We're like kids. Can I put my toe across the line? If I can put my toe across the line and mom and dad never do anything, then I can put my foot across the line. Eventually they jump across the line, and you have a disobedient child. And certainly I think Eve and Adam did similar things, and I think we do the same things today. So many people say, I would never eat from the fruit of the tree if God told me not to. Well, if you've sinned, you would eat from the tree. It's just a fact. So, and the Bible is very clear that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. If in 1 John it says that if you believe you have not sinned, then you lie to yourself. And so, and you lie to God. We've all sinned. We've all made mistakes. And so I want to encourage everybody to stay within the hedge, but not only stay within the hedge of protection. That's what you know in your heart to be right. That's what you know in the Bible to be right. Things you should and shouldn't do, and things you shouldn't tempt yourself with, because eventually you'll fall. And I think that's kind of what happened in the garden. Eve got a little too close to Satan, and so she was within the Garden of Eden, but within the Garden of Eden, she was seeing maybe how much she could get away with, or they could get away with, because they were together during the time of the temptation. But literally, I want to encourage everybody, stay as far away from temptation as you possibly can. And for men, I would say this: if you think you're pushing the envelope, just think of what would you do if your wife was standing there, for example. Well, God is standing there. God is always seeing all the things we do, and kind of relate the spiritual concept to what would your wife appreciate you flirting with somebody or winking at somebody or something like that. If your wife doesn't appreciate that, and if you wouldn't try to get away with things while your wife's not looking, because you know she's always going to find out, guys. God always knows. Don't do the same thing to God. Let me see what I can get away with. I'm going to stay within the hedge, but maybe I'll stick my toe out, and then later on it's my foot. Next thing you know, the devil's got you, and he brings you down, and the situation you're in is much worse than you probably ever thought it would be. And so that's kind of where we were in the first lesson in the resurrection series we're going to have. It's called More Than a Feeling. In other words, we can't just say that God's in my heart. We want to be, and that's enough for people to convince people. We want to be able to give people evidence for our faith. So the next few weeks is going to be on that resurrection, how it began. How did it begin? Because we stepped out of the hedge of protection. We allowed ourselves to be tempted. We stood there. We got as close to temptation as we possibly could. And then we eventually fell. And that happens to all of us. It continues to this day. Next week, we're going to be talking about who Lucifer is. Once again, we'll finish that up. And secondly, we're going to look at the battle between the power struggle in the flesh between man and women, which goes on in the world even today, all the way up to Hillary Clinton breaking the glass ceiling. She'd been elected president, as I used the example. The glass ceiling, basically. The struggle between man and woman. That'll be another thing that goes on. And we'll talk about that. And so I just want to encourage everybody today, stay with God, stay within the hedge of protection. Don't allow yourself to be tempted. Obey your conscience. If your conscience says don't do this, don't do this. I don't know why I'm coming up with this today, but it was in my heart. And so steer clear as far as possible away from that edge, because eventually the rocks slip away and you find yourself in a fall. So I hope everybody has a great day. We'll be in the resurrection series for the next several weeks, looking at the evidence showing and proving that Jesus is the Christ and that he is alive today. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.